right, so now we're starting. Okay, got it. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome once again to Wake the Nation. It's that time again. You know, you expect us once every month, right? About the third Sunday in each month, unless something happens, you know, or we have to reschedule. However, it's usually the third Sunday or thereabout, but it's one Sunday per month. Tonight's topic, without delay, let me just get into tonight's topic. We're talking about patriarchal society and are there drawbacks for men and women? Or, you know, at the end of this broadcast, I will upload to YouTube, and I'm sure my co-host, Crystal, Mrs. Collier, and Mrs. Love, they'll share, and you can respond in the chat, whether on Facebook. I'll upload it to my YouTube page as well, and we'll ask that you respond. We'd like to hear your feedback about it. So some folks might be asking, what's a patriarchal society? Well, it's a society that is structured to give men positions of power where they can exert absolute authority, whether over their homes or communities at large, right? And so in America, we have for centuries had all male leadership at the helm. All our presidents have been male. All our vice presidents up until 2020 have been male as well. In many other nations, though, we've had female leadership, even in the Bible. For those who read the Bible, there have been successful female leadership, efficient and effective female leadership. We just lost the Queen of England, who ruled for 70 years. Margaret Thatcher was the leading prime minister who ruled for 11 years. Golda Meir was the prime minister of Israel for 5 years. And there have been numerous queens on the continent of Africa for centuries, right? And they have been successful, okay? Some of the most noted, well, everybody knows about the Queen of Sheba, right? Okay. And she wasn't a fictional character. She was real. She was a real queen. Well, we have a vice president, and I must say, fortunately, because there's a law that was passed where there's a cap on the pay, she receives roughly $235,000 per year, which is the same as the former vice president, who is now the president. So there are no disparities between her salary and the former vice president. But many women in society today are not getting equal pay at all as to their male counterparts that are doing the same jobs with the same job titles, are not getting the same salary. Also, another topic we're going to discuss is what happens in a patriarchal society when the head of the household, who is a male, earns less than his female partner. So we're going to discuss that as well. So we'll start off with Mrs. Collier at this time. And if you know anything about in the patriarchal society, it's where men we're taught that men are to be the breadwinners in a patriarchal society. Men must not cry. So we teach our little boys, do not cry. You're a man, you're a man, you're supposed to be a man, or man up, don't cry. Men are strong, right? And women are the weaker sex. Women are less valuable. And a woman ought to be pretty and keep her mouth shut. And so those are some of the stereotypical comments that have been, we've lived with some of these, and some of you might have heard them, some of you might have lived them, and but we'll start off with Mrs. Collier with the salary disparities.
Hello, everyone. So in regards to patriarchy in the workplace, first thing that I want to say is being a woman, I know that this affects us with the globally the gender gap because women are historically paid much less than men. And that number can be, just a little over 50% less. So it's a lot less.
Wow.
Black women are at the bottom of the totem pole because even as women are paid less, Black women are paid less than white women for the same roles. Um, and it contributes in various different ways. That's one of them. But the other one that a lot of people, I think, see is the toxic masculinity in the workplace, right? Because that patriarchal society that that pretty much it what's the word I'm looking for? It it says that women are subservient, right?
Yes.
Denied rights, and
Mhm.
and this leads to that behavior where men they really they it's harmful because they try to outdo each other to see who's dominant in the workplace, and even
Right.
in that women suffer, right? Because they have this inflexible attitude and they look at the workplace as like a battle zone, something to be conquered.
Mm.
So while men attack each other that way, women tend to suffer the most still, because while they're doing that to them, they're also doing that to the women. And a lot of women tend to not speak up in the workplace for that reason.
Mm.
It decreases what's called organizational citizenship behavior, where
Mm.
people, rather than speaking up, men and women,
Mhm.
they tend to just stay quiet when they see something that's wrong. And we all end up on this road to nowhere because that toxic masculinity, it really creates a battle zone in the workplace.
Mm. Yes, it
things
real.
things tend to get out of control
Yeah.
when the leadership um you know is you know not checked, and that's what happens. And so in the workplace, um there needs to be more checks and balances with regards to that. But because there aren't, and because people are not speaking up, men and women, everyone suffers, but women suffer a whole lot more, because you know she's expected to work alongside the men, but she doesn't have the same um, attitude about successfully working in that atmosphere as the male does. As you said, men they tend to be um, competitive in their nature with regards to work, and so they're aggressive, and they attack the assignments and the things of that nature, whereas women, um, we go there to work. We don't necessarily come there to attack the assignment. We come there to just carry out the assignment. And so as long as the assignment is carried out, we're like, okay, it's done. And no, I don't want to have to argue or speak up, or for fear of making the my supervisor or my boss angry with me or not look at me favorably, and then I lose my job. So that's why, there's that hesitancy in speaking up. But you're absolutely right. Um, I remember not too long ago, the word toxic work environment wasn't even used. You just came to work, dealt with it the best way you could, got your paycheck, and then you went on. No one spoke about the environment or how you feel when you're at work. You just were expected to do the job, get the job done, and then you got paid. Even when you got paid, okay, yeah, your male counterpart got paid way more than you did, and you did the same job, or you worked together even, but you know, like that, it wasn't spoken of. It was just like, look, be happy you got a job, be happy you got a paycheck, and go somewhere and sit down. So,
but it also goes beyond that, because considering women as the weaker sex, then you undervalue her. You undervalue her opinion. You undervalue what she has to offer. If you think of her as the weaker sex, you're not thinking that what's up here is of any value to what you're doing. But a lot of times we have contributed more and still have gotten less pay, for the same job, and even putting out even quality jobs. And there are companies that in the past wouldn't hire a female for certain positions because they're like, well, you'll get pregnant. And it's as if that becomes a strike against her, meaning that she's not capable once she becomes pregnant to do anything, and that for the time that she'll be off, that she couldn't. And women really know how to multitask very well. I remember, at my job once, my boss asking me, how do you do so many things at one time and do it efficiently? Is one thing to do many tasks at one time, but to do it efficiently is, that's an accomplishment that I find that we can do very well. I mean, we are, many of us, wives and mothers, and, in the home, many wives have, they do the bookkeeping. They're part of the decision process, decision-making process. And what I find is that for a country that is ruled mainly, we are a patriarchal society in America. There are many homes that are run by women. There are many homes where mothers are the head of household. There are many homes where you have mothers who are who parenting male sons, male children that society teaches them one thing, and mother tries to just, do the best she can to help them not to fall into cracks or holes or down rabbit holes. But
can I interject for 1 second?
Yes,
we have to also remember the male households, because there are men that are single parents, and they get overlooked in this patriarchal society because they either, one, don't want to ask for help, or the programs are not geared towards male single parents.
Why do you think that is, though?
I know why that is.
Why is, hold on. Before you answer, just think about this. They are the primary breadwinners. But if they fall into the category where maybe they're a single parent by choice, they're a single parent because they've lost their spouse, or they're a single parent because they're caring for their child, period. Why then are not programs geared towards helping them?
Because child rearing is a gendered role. In a patriarchal society, it's the female that does most of the child rearing. She's expected to do the child rearing and care for the children, while the father, the male, he's out working. The female is expected, it's her role to be home, have babies, take care of the kids. And so in a patriarchal society, you know, the father being the single parent, he, you know, he's not expected to be the one that's directly caring for the children. He's supposed to, you know, get a female to do that for him. And if he's wealthy enough, he could pay a nanny or what have you. But if he's not, that's, you know, he has to figure it out. So, you know, that's why the programs they're not they weren't. Now we're doing a lot better because the single dads are speaking up and they are, you know, asking for help more now.
Even wedded dads can get now, is it called paternal leave?
Yes.
Yes. You know, we've really made strides, and that's the great part, because now we have maternal as well as paternal leave, which, you know, child rearing is not an easy task. I give credit to all the single parents. I've been one at a certain juncture in my life who rear, you know, any child. If you have one, and if you have more than one, kudos. Blessings. Yeah. So, but Mrs. Collier, why do you think then is it that there is such a disparity in the salary gap? You know, when men and women are doing the same jobs, and in today's society, seeing the strides we're coming along. Why then is there still that disparity, and especially for women of color being at the bottom of the totem pole? Anyone, you know, it doesn't have to be. If you want to answer, Mrs. Love, you can jump in.
Well, I think that for many years in this country, women were they were held to certain positions, jobs, and in those jobs, you know, those jobs that she was held to were not valued in the same way as the male jobs were. So even if the positions were similar, still the male's role or the male's performing that job was considered at a higher value than the female. For a long time in this country, women didn't even have the right to vote.
That's true.
And women got the right to vote several years after Black men got the right to vote. Black men got the right to vote before white women, women of color, period. Women of color were the last to get the right to vote, even though they worked hard and they carried the suffragette movement that got white women the right to vote. And so historically in this country, women were not, they were viewed as chattel. You know, married women, they were viewed similar to chattel. They were the man's property.
Yeah.
And so that's why when a woman gets married, she took on the man's last name, like anything else that the man owned. It carried his last name. And so for many years in this country, women could not obtain wealth unless she inherited it directly from her parents. Otherwise, She couldn't, a single woman, unmarried, I'm talking about, for a long time in this country, couldn't even get a credit card, couldn't open a bank account, could not make major purchases unless she had a husband. And her husband could purchase those things for her. So a unmarried woman could not buy a house, something that we take for granted, or buy a car. And back in the as late as the early 1900s.
Right.
They couldn't own anything. They couldn't purchase anything. They had to have a husband that would purchase it for them, or their father could purchase it for them.
So they could inherit.
So that they can inherit it. And the father had to write it out and make sure that his daughters got the inheritance or got his wealth like that. And for a long time in this country, if that daughter got married, the benefits that her father was giving her stopped. And she had to receive those benefits now from her husband. So if you were a woman never been married in this country, your parents died or what have you, you were broke. You were in dire financial straits. Okay, and that's all women.
I just find that a little bit archaic, but also as a first world country that was so behind in the times in regards to that, when you have third world and developing countries that would rightfully, women had the rights to do what many women here, and then especially now women of color. But I'm grateful that we're now making strides, and it doesn't matter what your race, your creed, or your color is. You can make purchases being single, and and continue. The pay disparity, though, does need to be addressed. That one still has to, we need to have that. Maybe there has to be some kind of a law, just the way we know that the vice president and the president's pay is capped off. You know what I mean? There is a law that puts that in place. So if we can have some kind of that, it should be equal pay if the jobs that we're doing is equal. If I'm doing the same as my male counterpart, then should we get equal pay? I think that's only fair. Anyway, I want to thank Mrs. Collier for her part on that. And now we're going to Mrs. Love, who already jumped in, but we'll talk about, what happens in a patriarchal society when, your female counterpart, your partner, makes more than you do as head of the household, and I would like for you to put in the comments, if you're on Facebook, put it in a comment, or when I upload to YouTube, you can share and ask that others chime in, because in order for things to change, we have to speak up. We're not just speaking about this just because, we want to talk about it. We want changes for our daughters, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. We want changes that when another 100 years go by, that they're not faced with situation going, wait, our forefathers, our progenitors were dealing with that in an era that should be more enlightened, I think. But as I said, so I would like you to share You have like what, 10 minutes? Yeah, go ahead and share and let us hear, 10, 15 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, because it was well, in the 19 I would say around the 1930s, right after the World War One, no, World War Two. There was a lot of, the United States suffered a lot of loss of men due to the war. We had World War One, and then we had World War Two, and we had lost a lot of young men that would, that were of that would have been part of the workforce during, had there not been so much war.
Yeah, and the loss of lives of
yes,
the
men. And so because we had lost so many men, and we were going through an industrial revolution, and factories, and we were striving to be first world nation, and in industry. And so we had all these factories, and we had all of these. We were the leader in putting out automobiles and the steel industry. Like, we had a burst of demand for products and things that this country was exporting. And so being that we lost a large part of our working population due to war, the United States had to open up jobs for women. And so this was the onset of women coming into the workforce. And they came in, and they took up a lot of the factory jobs, and with the a clothing manufacturer. A lot of women came in, replaced the male tailors. That's
where they got the sweatshops.
Yes, and became the seamstresses, and even children were working, to keep the industry going, and keep the economy going, even though we had a major loss in terms of the workforce population being men. And so many women started working for the very first time. They came out of their homes. They had to arrange for childcare and everything so that these women can work and keep our country's economy going, while the men were at war, or injured, or dead. And so that caused.
So you're saying that America did acknowledge, oh wait, women, they can't go to work now. Okay.
Yeah, right. they acknowledged it because there was a huge need. There was a huge need.
Forced to.
Yes.
To, yeah.
Yeah. Had we didn't have the major impacts of World War I and II like that, we might have still been in the Stone Ages. We might have. But yeah, and so
I pray not. We wouldn't have been able to be the superpower, the first world power then. If other nations are coming, no, then it wouldn't be. But as a mother of 5 young men, how does the patriarchal society affect you and your sons? Or are there any examples, or can you share with us, how it's?
Yeah. For one thing, growing up and being born in this country, the um, is indoctrinated in everywhere you turn. In school, it's reinforced in the home, in the even in church. Yeah, it's reinforced. So even me as growing up, I was raised that, okay, little girls, they do this over here, boys do this over there. I remember my grandmother, she that raised me. I was in high school, and I wanted to run track. I was really good at it. I found out when I was in junior high school, and I wanted to run track. And my grandmother was hesitant about allowing me to run track because she said, girls don't really do sports. She was concerned that I might hurt myself, or it would affect my body, a certain kind of way, because I was running track. I remember, but she let me run, and I ran for all 4 years in high school. But I remember those times when it was that time of the month. My grandmother was really worried about, oh, you're going to go run? You're going out, you're going to run? Because in her time, the women did not, engage in sports like that, or, they wasn't competing like that. They probably did do sports, but it wasn't, it wasn't really spoken about. It wasn't really a big to do. Here I am, I'm running high school track. For practice, I used to run against the boys at my high school. The girls and the boys track team trained together, lifting weights, all of that. And my grandmother was like, oh my God, like, you sure you're not going to hurt yourself? What about, when it's that time of the month, you still going to run? And yeah, I ran some of my best races. But I was saying all of that. I'm serious. I've said all of that to say that my grandmother, even though she allowed me to run track, she never came to any of my track meets.
Oh, really?
Never came. She would, make sure I had car fare to go, and I would come home with trophies and medals and everything, but she never came to a track meet because she said she believed that that's just not something that girls do. She was from that era where, no, they don't do that. And I was running track, and this was in the 80s. And that was the beginning, really, of female participation in sports. And so, and that was like, a big to do. Now, you watch the Olympics, the women are outrunning the men and winning gold medals and everything, just like everybody else. Basketball, you got the women's basketball and you got the men's basketball, but still to this day, the disparity in terms of pay is still very, very great. But to answer your question, because I was, reared in a patriarchal society, I was told as a little girl certain, my role when I become a woman, when I become a wife, this is how I'm supposed to act. These are the things that I'm supposed to do. And so when I grew up and I became a woman and I got married and I started having children, I continued in the way that I was trained. And so I raised my sons, their father, is the head of the household. He's the leader. I worked, but my children's father really, really wanted me to stay home and just mind the concerns of the house, take care of the children. I worked all the way up until I had my third son. And when I went out on maternity leave for my third son, my children's father said to me, well, it's probably best if you stayed home and reared the children as opposed to putting them in childcare. And he said to me, I got the bills. I got all of that. I think it would be best if you stayed home. Let's just try it. Because I didn't want to stay home and just raise children. I thought that I could raise my children, take care of the house, and go work, to help supplement the income that my children's father was making. And so, and that way we all would be good, really good. But he made it, clear to me that he would prefer if I was the one that was doing most of the raising of the children, even though my children were in after school and had babysitters when I was working. He said to me, I really would. We don't know what the babysitter is doing to our children, while you're at work, and everything. And, after school is good, but we don't know, at least if you're there, especially when they're small, we know what the children are getting. We know whose hands is on them. So I agreed. I was like, okay, I'll stay home, for the next two children that I had after that. And I was home, at-home mom for 10 years after that. And so my sons, they got to see mom, home. And, I was the one that picked them up from school and all that kind of stuff. And then once my youngest one got school age, I was back at work. Well, actually, I was back at work before that because when we got divorced, I had no choice. I had to work if I wanted to support my family and everything. And so I had to go to work. And when I went back to work, I started working for myself. I had started with my then life coaching business, Dunamis Life Coaching Services, and so my sons had to adjust and get used to me not being home when they came home from school. And I remember how that was something. Yeah, that was something. And, they got used to it and everything, but they had to get used to it. And, now they're like, yeah, well, okay, I survived that and everything. And now they're grown men and they, respect the fact that, yeah, women should work and women can work. My grandson's mothers work, and so my sons, in fact, they welcome that. They're like, yeah, because that takes the stress and the burden off of them being the man of the house and being the patriarch and the leader, head of household. It takes the burden of being the only one that is providing an income and being the only one that is supporting financially the family, so that if something happens to them or they get in a position where they have to take off from work and they can't work, the family doesn't just, go into, financial poverty immediately. At least, if, the wife or the partner is working, if they have to stop work for whatever reason or their income gets cut off, she's right there and, can supplement and carry the family, at least until he can get back. So my sons, they they welcome that. But what happens when, you know, the partner, the female, earns more than the male? Then things again get a little iffy and sticky, you know, get complicated. I have, you know, experienced that. You know, and a lot of my single friends that have really good jobs as women, you know, they're single, they're looking, you know, to be in a relationship with someone, you know, and everything. And many of them tell me that when it comes down to the conversation, they don't state how much they earn, because a lot of the men that they, you know, are you know, trying to start a relationship with, have an issue with the fact that, oh, you earn more than me. And so to, you know, keep the date going and keep the, you know, the conversation flowing so that you can continue to get to know each other, my friends tell me they will not, you know, come right out and say what their salary is, or they wouldn't even come right out and say exactly what they do for a living. They'll say, oh, well, you know, I work in the financial industry. You know, they won't come right out and say, oh, I'm chief financial officer, blah, 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 because right away the men are like, oh,
Yeah,
well,
because if they say they're the CFO or CEO of XYZ company, then they can look it up, and or they'll have if they have an idea of what they make, then it becomes problematic. But you know, that is a drawback from the patriarchal society, where it makes a man feel emasculated, right? If he's not earning top dollars.
Yes.
That if his female partner, whether it's his wife or the person he lives with or the person he's engaged to, you know, is making more money than he does, then he feels somewhat emasculated. And sometimes some women, once, because they have fought, because of the, see, this is what I'm talking about, drawbacks, because then she has to fight. And now when she has established herself and she is making a certain amount of money, realize that she's making more money than her male counterpart, or, you know, her partner, or the person she is considering being in a relationship with or marrying, it can become problematic. It has caused rifts in marriages even. And some women, the reason is that sometimes the moment she starts making more money, she is like, okay, now I'm the one that has all the say. And so does not consult her partner, does not, any decision to be made, especially if it's financial, she'll make that decision on her own. So this is what I'm talking about, drawbacks from the patriarchal society, in that it can become that two-edged sword, that even when one tries to overcome or has overcome, it still has its sting, like the tail of a scorpion stinging, you know, causing rifts in the relationships, and also sending sometimes parents, because of how, as you said, a parent who's been raised in a dominated by the patriarchal society, in today's society, sometimes that, you know, they like kind of go head to head to each other. For me personally, growing up, I grew up in the West Indies, in Jamaica, West Indies. That wasn't where I was born, but that was where my maternal mother came. My maternal grandmother was, and I was raised by her. My mom, of course, went out to work. My mom used to work in a pharmacy, and she migrated to the U.S. My great grandmother was a midwife, or I think you call them doulas here now, I don't know, but she used
And
to go.
midwife, yeah.
Right. She was a certified midwife. My grandmother was an entrepreneur. She owned her own business. So basically, I grew up with, and then learning about my great grandmother. I grew up, my grand aunt. I grew up with, my aunt was an entrepreneur as well. Ended up owning her own restaurant, and so I grew up with men and women who, female judges, lawyers. And so, yeah, even though my grandmother was home because her business was right there. And yes, she had helpers or servants. I don't, what the correct terminology is, but folks who, kind of helped to assist with taking care of us because she was doing that. But the thing about it is, for me, I didn't think that there was like, okay, there's a position that you can't do. Like, it's like,
yeah, you had no,
you
didn't have any gender
right,
occupations, right?
Exactly, because I was raised believing, and my grandmother would say, whatever you do, just do the best of it. And she never said whatever. It's like, whatever you want to do the best at whatever it is you choose to do. And it was never, oh, these are the careers that you should follow because you're a female. And when my brother was alive, that's the career he should follow because he's a male. It was never that way. And my brother and I mean, we were just, and people used to say this, we were like almost one and the same. We kind of sort of taught alike, and we were like very close. And so we just thought, whatever we wanted to do, that was just what we were going to do. But migrating now to America, I realized, wow, there are,
changes, yeah.
My first, I remembered, I was in a club at my junior college, and oh my goodness, it was an advertising club. And I remembered I had designed the letterhead for our club, and I freestyle designed it, and that was fine, and the men accepted it. And when it came to, because we literally started the club, and so when it was organized, everybody was like, oh, Florencia, you're so organized, and so forth and so on. And I'll never forget, the president's position came up, and they only selected male.
Yep.
The vice president position came up, and I'll never forget, a friend of mine that was from Jamaica as well said, well, let Florencia be the vice president because she does so much. And they were like, no, she could be the secretary.
Mm-hmm.
And yep. I'll never forget, it was just such a, Now, yeah. Me being raised how I was raised, because not to say that, listen, in high school, my friend Janet Watson, shout out to you, Yvette Ferguson, my cousin, she's now a doctor in, she's in Boston. I think Myrna Graham, we were the only females who was taking agricultural science, because the male students were allowed to take agricultural science, and the females had to do home economics. My cousin, I think my cousin and Yvette did technical drawing. I wasn't interested in that. So, but can I tell you, almost the teacher, our high school teacher, he was so upset because we all as females got the highest grades for midterm. He was like, no. He fought. Now, I'm talking about after midterms. Now, anybody who goes to school in the islands, you know about this. Listen, it's not like here. Midterms, you're doing pretty much halfway through the books. So finals is not the next half. It's the entire book. Now, we were never in home economics. We were never in the cooker class. So how are we supposed to listen? Shortly before finals, this man advocated, got the principal, marched. He was like, no, they have to go. And we weren't allowed to take our finals. That, I should say, that was the first time. It wasn't even here in America. That was the first time. And that was a shock for my sister because I wasn't raised that way. My cousin, we weren't raised that way. That was the reason why we went to agricultural science. We just figured if we have up here, if we can do it, then we are going to do it because that's what we want to do. But we were being told no. And we were literally marched out. He got the principal to come and escort us. And this wasn't like right after midterm. This was like shortly before the finals. Listen.
Wow.
And we had now to prepare. Instead of preparing for what we already knew, we had to prepare for what we didn't know for finals. But so I should say, but still, that was such a shock to say to me, oh, you can be the secretary.
Yeah.
And so, and then I learned something. Secretarial work, though. Those who are secretaries, you never undermine a secretary.
Exactly.
Because she's really the pulse of the company. Seriously, especially the executive secretaries. Those. Because they know. So the thing that I'm trying to say is that even though in a patriarchal society, it tries to keep women down, you simply cannot, because there's so much to her. She's birth giver. And along with being birth giver, she has certain, I just want to share this, and I'm going to let you give your final thoughts, but I want to share this with, and I'm sure some of you may have heard of it, King Lemuel. He gave his son the following advice, right? He's saying to his son, he said, he was telling his son this advice in order for his son to become a great leader. He said, listen, whoever finds, he's like, you need to go find a wife, right? And this is the kind of wife you need. She's a woman of strength and mighty valor. So no, women, we're not in any way, shape, or form weak. And we're not saying that our husbands cannot be the head of the household, but we have to communicate together. We have to share ideas and make the plans for our families together, you know, and come to the table together, right? Because no man is an island, okay? All right. And so you continue reading, it says, she's full of wealth and wisdom. This is the king saying this. The price paid for her was greater than many jewels. Now, price not in terms of buying her, but in terms of her value. He saw her value and wanted his son to know she's valuable, value her. Her husband has entrusted his heart to her, for she brings him rich spoils of victory, meaning that she has a lot to offer in order for him to be successful. Listen, I don't know about anybody, but this is how I say, husband, am I a value? Maybe we should have had the men join in. Okay, but okay, here it goes.
Men, comment, you know, share, and comment. We want to hear from
put
you.
it in the comment. Exactly. Thank you. She gives out revelation truth to feed others. She is a like trading a ship, bringing divine supplies from the merchant. Do you know that a woman's discernment know? You know this. Oh man, if you want to be truthful, you know it. She's very discerning. Many times a woman, you know, and it's not that she's not astute. But anyway, let me just continue because I'm going to let you do your closing remarks. So he said to his son at the end of his speech to his son, and you can read it for yourself, but I'm just doing this. At the end of his speech to his son, he said, so go ahead, give her credit that is due, for she has become a radiant woman, and all her loving works of righteousness deserves to be admired at the gateway. Listen, I don't know why I'm saying my internet is unstable, but he is saying that, listen, this kind of woman, she is valuable. Women, know your worth. In any society, you've got to know your worth. And men, value your women because, listen, together, you're a dynamic force to be reckoned with. It's not one or the other. It's that. See this? When you join together. So, young men, young women, put your comment in the chat. Or once it's uploaded to YouTube, and do it for Crystal's when she shares it, or Mrs. Love. She has a lot of titles. I'm just going to say Mrs. Love right now as the co-host. These are my co-hosts. So put it in their chats as well. And right, what are some of the drawbacks that you find? And how does it affect you living in a patriarchal society, knowing what you have to offer? So, all my little ones, Al, City, Tim, I know Tim will have a lot to say. Nicholas, Marquise, Lenny, Hector, Nigel, Fresco, Pat, Alan, DJ, Frenchie, all of you, and others. I may not know your names, but listen, put in the chat and let us know, because we need there's still changes. We need equal pay. We need, come on, there's a lot that we need. And we need our men to not feel emasculated if your female counterpart, your partner is making more money than you, then it's an asset, not a deficit. Come on. So, I turn it over, and I don't know if Mrs. Collier is still there. I know she has some projects that she's working on, and but if you're there, so Mrs. Chaplin, Reverend Deacon, counselor, psychologist, Love, you can go ahead, and if Crystal is there, then I'll ask for the closing remarks. Thank you.
Are you there, Crystal? Okay. Well, I just want to, thank you for bringing this topic. This is a very appropriate topic, particularly now. Everybody is getting ready for the holidays. People are going Christmas shopping. And so there's going to be a lot of discussion in terms of money being spent, going on amongst the couples and amongst partners and heads of household and all of that. But I wanted to say that it's being raised in a patriarchal society in present day does have a lot of drawbacks, both for men as well as for women.
Yeah.
The men who, they were used to, being in leadership, certain kinds of expectations is placed on them, and those expectations that were placed on them because of the shifts and the changes, in modern society, those expectations, some of them become unrealistic. You were told and raised to believe that you would be the sole provider in the family. But, with this economy in this country, both partners have to work. It's not even feasible any longer for one partner to stay at home. Even it affects the children. The children have to at some point go to school, and then they may have to get a babysitter or after school. But childcare is here to stay, and so those expectations have to be revisited, and partners and couples have to really look at what works best for them.
Yes,
and
exactly.
and you have to be flexible now, because we're transitioning. Those things that used to work, pre-pandemic and everything, no longer work any longer. So now we have to come with a new set of priorities, expectations, and things. So even gender roles have to be changed. So, it might work best that the mother goes out to work, and the dad stays home and rear the children. That doesn't make the dad any less of a man.
No,
that doesn't make the mother, any less of a woman.
No, it doesn't make her a man.
Right. It doesn't make her
still,
more masculine, doesn't make him
exactly
feminine.
She's still walking in her role
exactly
as a woman. And the other thing is, do you remember, because I've been to some seminars, and lately though, because it was like taboo for men to get therapy, to go to therapy, to get counseling, to share their feelings, what they're going through. But did you realize that I was and in the 80s, I don't remember what the percentage of men who used to just, the lifespan was shorter.
Yes.
Because a lot of men were keeling over from heart attacks because they were just
keeping everything inside.
Yes, and keeping everything inside. But now society is allowing them, or I think men are fighting back against the same patriarchal society to say, wait a minute, I have to speak my truth. I have to express. I have to get out. Women alone. And then when women used to express or cry, you were considered to be weak or she's
overly emotional.
Yeah, there's the word, or emotionally disturbed.
Yes.
Right? When it's a terminology that applies to anyone, because everybody has emotions, right?
Right.
So if you're upset, everybody has that right. So, and we have that channel. So I'm glad that in today's society, though, more men are taking advantage, and more relationships are staying together because of that. So because it's different personalities, and it's one thing if you live with someone who really doesn't understand himself, or is afraid to own up to what they're feeling, or afraid to show their emotions. And so,
we as a society today, we have given men more of outlets, and we encourage the men, look, don't stand there and just try to deal with things by yourself. Talk to somebody, male or female. Talk to somebody. We have therapists, we have coaches, we have counselors, we have all of these things right at your fingertips. And yes, I see my clients are both male and female, and I'm seeing an increase in the men reaching out for that kind of for therapy. They still kind of prefer male therapists because they feel like, well, I could talk to you, but you're not a man, so you don't really
understand better.
Yeah, they figure that you see me, on the same level. And so you understand what I'm trying to say, or what I can't say, but I need to say, that kind of thing. So there is that, but more and more men are reaching out to me for therapy and things of that nature, because we're all here together. And we have to work with each other, otherwise it just won't work. And we've been male dominated patriarchal society for so many years, and we started from the bottom and now we're here. So where do we go from here?
Well, in closing, I just want to say that we can look forward to maybe a female president of this here United States of America. Who knows? We'll never know how soon that could be, but it might be sooner than we think. All righty. So we just wanted to shed some light and to have some discussion on that, and for those who aren't aware to be aware, and for those who already are but may not want to speak up. Hey, as I said before, put it in this chat, or I'm going to upload it to YouTube, to my YouTube channel, and you can also put it in the chat for Thais Love. And also, if you need to speak to a counselor, you can reach out to her Dunamis Sound Minds. It's 718-576-8110. That's 718-576-8110. Dunamis, Dunamis. You can find her on Facebook. SOUNDMINDS. You can find her, and you can reach out to her. So we want to thank you for tuning in tonight, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules, and happy birthday to you, Apostle Ingrid, and all those who are celebrating their birthdays on today. So thank you for joining. Thank you for tuning in. Well, one of our co-hosts had to leave. As I said, she's working on a project. She has some deadlines, and she had to leave. But she's
multitasking.
Yes, she's multitasking. Thank you, Mrs. Scullier, for your time that you actually sacrificed to join with us. And thank you, Chaplain Thais Love. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Yes, and happy holidays to everyone.
And if you celebrate,
but just enjoy time with your families, and just have this discussion. We started it off, and so have this discussion, and we'd like to hear from you. So be sure to put your comments in the chat. Don't forget to like and share this video with those that could utilize this information and conversation. And so thank you once again.
Yeah, you never know. You might save a relationship from going to pause, because, sometimes they love each other, but just not being able to share thoughts, speak to each other, that can ruin things.
Yes. Right. And I mean, with when I do a lot of relationship counseling, and the love is there. It's just the struggle is just coming to that common place, that meeting point where everybody agrees and it works for everybody, But yeah, so I'm looking forward to seeing the comments and the questions and the conversations in the chat. So we'll be looking forward to your comments. So please feel free to put your comments in, and we'll respond right away too. So
okay. All righty. Good night, everyone. Take care. Thank you.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.